welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marcelo Baqueroalvarez, and I'm the author for Authoritarianism and Propaganda, the Puppet Master Tools, and Woke and Proud, the Charlatans on Convenience. And before I say anything else, I want to thank Books Magnet Books Readers Magnet for having me here. I wouldn't be having the opportunity to be speaking to such a wonderful audience if it was not for them. So thank you so much for amplifying my message. And I would like to talk a little bit about what is the purpose for my books and what do I actually mean by these titles, the symbology, and what we actually want to portray with them. So thank you for joining me for this next half hour or so. So a little bit about myself before we talk about the books. So I also own a website called halflifecrisis.com, much like that, Half-Life Crisis, and that is a father and daughter project where I get to talk about different things that are thought-provoking and as well to provide an avenue for artistic development with my daughter. So it's a daughter-dad project, and we get to talk a little bit about different things that we find interesting in exuberant detail. The other thing about me, I am about to retire from active duty Navy, so I've been doing the Navy service for about 20 years, and in just a couple of months I'm going to be gone. So thank you, Monique. Thank you. Hello, very nice meeting you. Thank you so much for joining us. And a couple of other things about me, I also own a company. It's called BZ Vision. So just like my nickname, BZ Vision, and it's bzvision.com, but my website, halflifecrisis.com, www.halflifecrisis.com is a place where I get to write a lot of things that I find in exuberant detail and interesting. So let's talk a little bit about what my books are all about. So Authoritarianism, Propaganda, and Woke and Proud, the Puppet Master Tools. Those two books are nonfiction. They're thought-provoking historical recounts and analysis about what's been going on around the world. They were both written on board the USS Cole DDG-67. That is the same vessel that was attacked by violent extremists in Yemen back in 2000. So it has a lot of connotation whenever I get the chance to write these books, not just because of the situation. Hello, Roxanne. Very nice meeting you. Thank you for joining us. But I also want to talk about the meaning behind what occurred back in 2000 and how it continues to sustain today in today's history. So that's what we have going on over here. So both, as I said, they're thought-provoking historical recounts of historical events that have occurred, particularly for authoritarianism propaganda. I didn't want to go too far in history, so I went as far back to the Bolshevik Revolution, so kind of like around the times when the Soviet Union started, and moving as forward as around the time when we have the times in Pinochet, about in the 90s. So you can juxtapose what was going on in the geopolitical situation during those regimes. It doesn't matter if it's left or right side of the political spectrums. Authoritarians, they come in both flavors, and often people that are under the heel of an authoritarian, let's say to the right or to the left, they have a tendency also to move violently from one side to the other in the spectrum. Why is that? Is because authoritarians, they thrive on the visceral responses from people. What does that mean? That means that whenever people might feel enraged, when they're angry, when there's some sort of emotion that is actually going to transcend who they are, they're going to turn a rhetoric into action. What does that mean? Okay, so let me give you an example. Thank you so much, Reginald. Thank you for being here. So let's talk a little bit about what we're talking about in these books and how to control them. So uh, just let's do this quick exercise with me. Have you ever been angry? And I'm not talking about being just super mad or just upset. I'm talking furious rage, when you would be incredibly mad in something, maybe even yourself, stop you from doing something that you would regret later. The good news is that most people are actually really good in some ways. They would actually have that self-stop button. But what if that rage was not only condoned, but it was actually rewarded for a long period of time, until you feel that what you're doing is not only vindicated, but is actually the right thing to do? It is good versus evil, us against them. They are wrong. They are the bad people. They are not the person that is representative of who we are doing. So they start getting more and more dehumanized. That's what authoritarians do. Now, this is the interesting thing, is that we are actually more similar than different. But for certain authoritarians, they want to change that. They need to divide us. They realize that if we're united, it is very hard to break us up. But if we're divided, it is very easy to move around. Hey, Catherine, very nice meeting you. So, what do we actually want to be talking about in this book? Okay, so when I wrote this book, it is actually kind of a short read, but it is a short read for a reason. It is not actually meant to be just read once. It's meant to be read several times. I'll show you a little bit inside the book. Over here, there's all kinds of symbolism, anywhere from the cover to even the warning. There's some litmus tests that are all over the book. And the reason for that is because it's designed to pair intellectual honesty with critical thinking. What does that mean? So, a person can have critical thinking but still being correct. There's people who believe all kinds of different things that are not correct, and they are conditioned to believe that it is the correct narrative. How does that happen? Well, sometimes it could be because of the environment. Some people might actually be growing in a probably a good family. That doesn't mean that they're actually bad people, but everybody in their circle is going to have a certain set of beliefs, and they get into this little bubble. When they get into this little bubble, everything else that is outside the bubble is going to feel like they are, let's say, not correct about certain things. Now, what if an authoritarian say, well, those people who are not necessarily correct, or they're not necessarily having the same feelings that you have, or don't agree on everything, they're actually the bad people, and we're going to start making them more and more alienated from this other core group. We're going to be showing certain flaws. Maybe some of those flaws are going to be justified to a certain point, but now we're going to exacerbate those faults, and we're going to make them more and more dangerous for other people. That is exactly what has been happening for years. This is nothing new. This has been going on from the beginning of, pretty much from the beginning of history. They realize, okay, that if a person wants to be in power, they need to separate the people that are not going to be agreeing with them. How they're going to be doing that? Sometimes it's going to be very brutally uh, imposed such in certain regimes, they're just essentially going to be conducting summary executions or some other terrible crimes against humanity, and you can actually see that throughout history. But moving a little bit closer to when there's actually rules about war, rules about society, international courts, and all the good stuff, things start getting a little bit harder. That's why I actually started from the Bolshevik Revolution, because that actually gives you a little bit of an idea as far as what was going on with people that actually started to try to get out of that kind of like out of that mentality that everybody else is being treating them bad, everybody else is not being really good to us, so we need to rise against their power and try to find a better situation for everybody else. Okay, so that actually kind of like happening during the Bolshevik Revolution. The Tsar, which was Nicholas II at the time in Russia, he had unilateral power over everything. Essentially, he was an authoritarian. If you spoke out of turn, much like any other authoritarian, they would just kill you and everything you ever loved. So it was not a good time for anybody at that point. There comes Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here with us. So, talking a little bit more as far as for the Bolshevik Revolution, then Lenin, who was actually an elite person, so very interesting, because even though he went and created the Communist Party, he was actually not a poor person, but he did not enjoy the regime under Nicholas II. So whenever the Tsar was essentially trying to get this unilateral power, much like any other authoritarian, they actually have a bad economy. What do I mean by that? Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much. I love to see you here too. So when they have these moments where there's unilateral power, it has a low shelf life. It is never sustainable. Why? Because they start getting surrounded by yes men, yes women, people that are just going to do whatever this person who is in power tells them what to do. That's what in my book I call them obedient fools or useful fools. Now, this is the problem with the useful fool. Sometimes they have a tendency to be very vocal. They have a tendency to be sometimes very violent, and they're going to be doing things that are probably not going to be good for anybody, including themselves. But they don't really realize that, because what they don't realize is that for an authoritarian, even the most loyal person, it is actually disposable. The moment that they are no longer convenient, it doesn't matter if they were willing to give their lives for this authoritarian, they're going to disavow them in a moment's notice. So something similar was happening during the Bolshevik Revolution, when Lenin actually started taking power over, or trying to bring a whole bunch of other people who were otherwise destitute, and they needed to raise against the Tsar to create the Soviet Union. Now, in principle, and I want to be very, very careful, and I'm not actually condoning communism, but we have to understand what was going on in the hearts and minds of the people at that time. Say, okay, we have the uh, Tsar who is treating us bad, and there comes this guy who has a really good idea to raise against the Tsar, so we can actually create some type of utopia for everybody else. And essentially, that's what they were actually fighting for. Now, the problem is that when this unlimited power actually came to the communists, they start making a lot of other mistakes, because some people were not there for the right reasons, but they were actually trying to get into how they can actually galvanize their power. Thank you so much, Jess. I appreciate you. I hope you really enjoy the book. So, one of the things, fast forward doing in the Soviet Union, now we actually get to hear about Stalin. So, funny thing, Stalin, and even though he was kind of like an acolyte to Lenin for a long time, Stalin, he was really into this thing for himself. That's really what he wanted to do. Stalin, he didn't actually have a really high position, but he was kind of like a recruiter, a person, like putting human resources, putting different people in different positions that would be actually useful for him. So he started adding these positions, like writing underneath Lenin's nose. And when Lenin finally got hold of what Stalin was doing, he already didn't have any power. He has already given the power to all these other corrupt people, who they remember Lenin say like, oh, remember when I put you in that position, I gave you that particular post, I gave you that particular area for you to do whatever you were going to be doing. and then you start seeing those changes into whatever people have a good idea when they started with the Bolshevik Revolution to say, okay, we're going to make a better life for us all. Then all of a sudden, some person from a totally different set of authoritarian values start making it worse for them. Does that make sense? So you see moving from one side of the spectrum in the political spectrum all the way to the other extreme. So that happens. It is going to actually be when people start feeling that they have the visceral response that I start actually moving from one side to the other. So when I start writing this book over here, if you look at the table of contents in my website, also I publish them also. You can have a little bit of a snippet of what's going on there. I'll read you a little bit here so you can see what is going on the actual chapters. All right. So a little bit hard to see maybe from this camera, but the first thing starts. Chapter 1, a hidden world on display, hiding in plain sight. That is where the authoritarians thrive, normalizing things that make us feel that we're correct, make us feel that we are doing the right things, makes us feel that if mom, dad, my pastor, my uncle, and Uncle Timmy, and all these other people, they know what they are doing, they can all be wrong, right? They cannot be wrong. It becomes counterintuitive for them. So that's why it's so easy to actually hide in plain sight. Another thing that I did in this book, I actually talk about a whole bunch of different authoritarians. Ooh, it's my wife. She's online. Thank you so much for my wife. She's on the other side of the country. Thank you. I love her too, also. And the reason why I chose these ones, I want you to see actually the names. They're left and right leaning. It doesn't matter for an authoritarian if you lean to the right or to the left. It's irrelevant. This is what they want. They want to know how many um, biases you have that are exploitable, and then they're going to exploit them. That's what that is the whole game. Of course, I get to put this in different in a different way how it's actually going to flow, and so you can actually see how the game is being played. So we can actually turn propaganda on its side or upside down. It is dangerous because it's happening right now again. If you haven't actually paying attention, Alfredo, thank you so much. I appreciate, brother. So it is happening again. History repeats itself. And the authoritarians are going to actually use certain different terms and certain rhetoric that is going to be pretty much consistent. You can go from the beginning of time, from the beginning of civilization. I went back to the Bolshevik Revolution because there's people who are still alive from that time and up to the 90s because then I don't want to actually talk about any authoritarians by name because authoritarians, they have a tendency to be very insecure. If you talk bad about an authoritarian, they have a tendency to react very violently. And their acolytes, they also have a tendency to defend their leader in a very violent way. You can see sometimes that in social media. You see somebody talking something about a person that might be a strong man, then these people, they have a tendency to get very emotional. Cassandra, thank you so much. I appreciate. And this is happening a lot, and I'm not going to say, like which social medias you can actually see that, but just look at the rhetoric. Just look, particularly some people who are very violent or that would be having a proclivity to do something that they might regret. They have a tendency to hide their faces, either behind an avatar that is just some sort of maybe sinister looking thing, and there's no link to a website or anything that you can actually see who these people are. And I have had actually interesting conversations with some of these people. They say, well, I don't want the brown shirts to go and look for me, kind of like doing as an allusion to the fascists, that they used to have those brown shirts and they used to go be looking for people. And say, like, well, if you're not really harassing people, then you're not really having to hide your face because you're not really doing something that you would regret, right? In other words, we can have disagreements, we can have a conversation with other people, but there's going to be a certain group of people that they have a proclivity to actually follow a dear leader or follow a person that has some level of authority, but not really paying attention to what is actually going on in their own lives. So thank you so much. Yes, sometimes staying in the media, it can be really crazy. Thank you, Jeffrey. I agree with you. Now, the thing is that we're in all of this together, and that is the hardest part to not see. There's another reason why I actually wrote this other book. Okay, Woke and Proud, The Charlatan's Inconvenience. And I wrote it in that specific manner because I wanted to create that thought provoking. What does that mean? How does that make me feel? If I hear woke, does that make me angry? Does that make me feel happy? Am I woke? Am I not woke? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Who's the charlatan? Is it me, the charlatan? Is a charlatan actually telling me what to do? So, what I did, I actually wanted to define this term in a way so you can actually see how propaganda actually can be weaponized in our time. So, that's how we're actually doing. So that is a good question. So JP, wondering if the characteristics of politicians with authoritarian tendencies and how does authoritarianism differ from other forms of government? So there is a difference. The difference from that, and that's actually why I wrote these books, is that if a person goes to either side of the spectrum, I wrote actually one of the chapters. I actually define politics, and I put a couple of nice little charts here. Let me show you right here. Um, there is two different ways that people actually see the political spectrum. They see it this way. This is the incorrect way to see it. See, have right and left to the other side. That is designed to actually say that it's us against them. In the reality, the political spectrum is more like this. You've probably seen the horseshoe thing. The further down that you go down from this area, which would be the echo chamber, then either you have fascism or communism on either side. Once you start getting down to either one of those sides, if you speak out of turn, they kill you and everything you ever loved. That's how it works. They become a mirror image of the same monster. The dangerous portion is when people are actually getting to that echo chamber, because little by little, people start gravitating more towards feeling, okay, what I'm doing is correct. What they are doing is not correct. Never mind that perhaps you were agreeing with that person just maybe 2 weeks ago, but now it's getting more and more towards a side that it's harder for us to understand. That now we are probably being bamboozled or that we're being seduced by that. I can tell you about negative content. Yes. So when I wrote Woke and Proud, okay, so it's interesting, because some people don't actually realize that woke actually it's the term itself is really irrelevant. They could have called it Hello Kitty, or they could have called it like a water bottle, could have called it whatever, I wanted to do that. The reason why it is actually so incendiary is because it actually is defined as being alert. The term actually started, has dates to the 1800s around the Civil War. And it, of course, it has been weaponized in many different ways. And unfortunately, it had a certain period of time that it became a parody of itself, and it lended to a lot of unscrupulous people to really change the reality of what it actually is doing. So what I do in this book, I actually define it in the way that is defined in a dictionary form and put in the analysis. Then I define it in a colloquial way, put in an entire timeline how that goes. And of course, I put it in how something similar has been going on through history to probably utilize different terms as far as how we are actually going to be weaponizing. So this is the point, again, from both of these books. The authoritarian want us to be divided. Thank you so much, Catherine. I really appreciate that. So they want to divide us because when we're united, it is harder for an adversary to get to us. Okay. So, particularly in the United States of America, most people, most Americans are actually really good people. Even just imagine whatever is like the craziest relative that you have sitting down in Thanksgiving. Cassandra, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So, just imagine the craziest person that nobody wants to sit next to them in Thanksgiving. Now they actually have an opportunity to be able to see what is the reality, where they're actually wrong. That is the intellectual honesty. So let me say, this is intellectual honesty. If let's say that you favor one worldview in some way unequivocally, and it doesn't matter how wrong it is, you still say, well, that's still pretty good. But now you attribute the same metric in the same circumstances to something that you don't subscribe to, but you cannot do it unequivocally, then you're not intellectually honest. You could be exploited by somebody that found a bias, wiggle the way around there, and start pulling them. In the book, I actually let you know that some of those things are not going to be very fast. There is not going to be what's the term? It is not going to be an immediate gratification. Some of these things are going to be lingering for weeks, for months, for years. That's why the indoctrination of certain children that we've seen in the times of the Nazis, and even the very, very, for sure, during the Soviet Union. And we're talking two very different political views. Okay, so we're talking about when we're talking about the Nazis, they're fascism. So all extreme right. And we're talking communism. We're talking extreme left. Both of them authoritarian. Melissa, thank you so much. I really appreciate your comment. And the most important thing, really, what I want to do is to help my readers to see if they haven't been bamboozled themselves, because it is very easy for us, and I can count myself included on that as we grow up. We might start gravitating towards something, okay, that say like, okay, everybody seems to be agreeing with me. Everybody seems, to be talking, the same thing that I'm talking. And then when somebody's actually saying something different, I go like, ooh, you know what? That is a topic that I just don't want to talk about that, because now it hurts me personally. That is exactly what the authoritarian wants. They actually want to do that. So how does the authoritarian works and control society? So there's different ways, okay? So the first way is going to be each person. Sometimes the worst enemy is the person between our ears. So if a person between our ears has a certain bias that is going to be exploitable, then it's very easy for them to actually say, okay, I'm going to either have you to play with us, or I'm going to discredit you and you don't get to play with us. Does that make sense? So that's kind of like how this situation actually works. It starts always with us. So we, the people, are the key to actually break free from the authoritarian ties by making sure that we are both using critical thinking paired with intellectual honesty, and understand what our biases are. And even if we have to accept them, because nobody's perfect, we all have blind spots, every last one of us. So that's fine. But if we understand what our idiosyncrasies are, then we can actually see if somebody has been feeding us some information that sounds very convincing. This is the thing: when something is real, it doesn't matter how complex it is, the math is always going to add up. But when something is not real, no matter how well crafted the lie is, it is just not going to add somewhere, no matter how well they try to actually make it look. Does that make sense? So hopefully that answers the question. Jennifer, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. When you're reading the book, yes, I do have a tendency to put a little bit of sarcasm, but just enough. Okay, so there's going to be some specific and strategically placed redundancy in certain places. So my books, what they do, they're going to be pulling people in all directions, much like spokes in a bicycle wheel, but they all move in a certain direction. So that way, it goes through the intellectual honesty, going like, okay, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me. Ooh, I've seen that, to somebody else. But then when it comes to us, say like, oh wow, no, that's totally applies to me, And then what do we actually get to do about that? Either we accept those idiosyncrasies, or we're going to get to the point say like, well, I don't want to hear what they have to say anymore. I'm just going to get into my bubble. If that is the case, then a person could be exploited. They could be actually put into the echo chamber. And through my writing, that's what I'm actually trying to do. I'm trying to wake up people to see something different. And of course, I have to put this in book content, but if you go to my website, www.thehalflifecrisis.com, I write long form articles about this stuff all the time. The truth is that I'll be happy to talk to anybody who want to listen to me for 19 chapters combined, but it's hard, to be able to reach that many people in that way. But what I want to actually do is making sure that we have that opportunity to have those conversations, particularly with those people who are frustrating to talk. Okay, we all know these people that we have a conversation at some point, so like, okay, it's hard to chat with this person. So that's what I want to try to create, that dialogue, so we can actually move between people. Just thank you so much. I really appreciate. Thank you so much. And one of the things, that I like to tell people is, I didn't write a book to sell a book. I'm trying to pass a message, because history is repeating itself. And in the Navy, I'm an analyst. That's what I do. I read a whole bunch of stuff. Like, by a lot of stuff is like an insane amount of stuff, and I have to write reports, and somebody makes decisions about that. And everything that I've written, I have quote unquote predicted. It has been happening, just as though I would have script. And it's not that I have any superpowers and nothing like that. It's just when you actually have a chance to see the full information, it just makes sense. You just get to see how things are actually moving forward. So that is what I've been able to essentially do with my writing. This is what I've been able to do with the people that actually make decisions when I'm not actually writing in this type of format, but professionally, if that makes sense. So now the point is, as I'm leaving active duty, do I want to be part of history in the right side of history, or if I have an opportunity to maybe share something that would resonate with some people, I can actually do that. So that is all my time, but I'm going to be back tomorrow at 1400 or 2 p.m. Eastern time. So if we can be together, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this time in the comments. And my books are available wherever books are sold. So thank you so much. I'll be just here until they tell me that my time is off. Okay. Thank you for joining me. And thank you for Readers Magnet for hosting this wonderful time today.